day where the Bison defense was honored.
Daniels on the backfield. Big hit. Over on the sidelines by Jackson Yankee.
The Bison defense shine.
Down he goes. Bison putting on the pressure, and he is taken down on the play.
A shutout performance of Missouri State, improving to 7-0 this season, extending the winning streak to 28 games. Now, the Bison turn their attention to South Dakota State.
Bouncing outside, he lost the ball. Picked up by South Dakota State.
A return trip to the place where the Herd last lost. Two teams with plenty of history meeting up, and to the victor, a 75-pound piece of quartzite. The last two teams unbeaten in Valley play do battle for the Dakota marker, and it starts now.
This is the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football Pregame Show.
Number 1 versus number 3. We are live down here in Brookings, South Dakota for the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football Pregame Show. Kyle Emanuel, Bethel, Alex Egan here for the next 60 minutes, getting you set for North Dakota State and South Dakota State.
Had to get down here to Brookings, South Dakota for this matchup. I mean, if it was good enough for ESPN, it's good enough for us.
I guess it's good enough for us. Yeah, we've been in Brookings a little bit too long for my liking, but yeah, I'm happy to be here. This is a big-time game, obviously.
We've talked a lot, too, about the renovations here. This is a very different South Dakota State than you ever played.
Yeah, and to me, this is the result of NDSU's success. I mean, I think South Dakota State looked at it and they're like, oh, we're losing games, we're losing recruits. We have to do something, and this is completely different. For fans who have not been down here, this was a glorified high school stadium. It was a high school stadium before. And now, I mean, I hate to admit it, but these might be the best facilities in the Missouri Valley at this point.
Well, and a big part of this weekend was college game day. Alex braving the elements this morning to get out there.
Yeah, it was chilly, but there were maybe about 1,000 fans out there. We'll take a look at some of the game day footage that we had from this morning, and I tell you what, it was a good time out there. Plenty of flags flying. The Bison fans were slow to roll in. If you were watching the first hour of the show,
there were some really big high school games last night.
Yeah, and so Bison fans were getting down here, but we went by the Bison tailgate lot. They separate them out here, and there were a lot of Bison fans there. They made their way over to the game day set there on campus, but pretty cool to see game day here in Brookings.
And most importantly, Kirk Herbstreit and Lee Corso both picked NDSU. Pat McAfee, not so much. He's not even from here. He doesn't even go here.
He doesn't even go.
I mean,
just to drop some mean girls on you.
I'll get to that a little bit later. But yeah, I'm impressed with Pat. I like Pat a lot. He's funny. He's a good guy. I enjoy following him on social media. But I don't think he's my friend went to school here, so I'm gonna pick them.
He's pandering, and that's okay.
The good thing is that Lee Corso said you can't pick against family, and that's pretty good. But you know what, you guys, this game is a whole lot more at risk than just the Dakota marker college game day. And when you look at this game, there's kind of I was talking to Ryan Gellner about it this week. There's a little bit of a good, the bad, and the ugly that comes with a rivalry like this. The good, obviously, a ton of really good NDSU football memories. Hoisting that Dakota marker, there's a long list of memories that go there. I know Kyle remembers holding on to that 75-pound rock there. And there's a lot of good memories to go with it, and I think that's what we choose to remember. The playoff victories, absolutely. Beyond that, though, you kind of get to some of the bad, and I think there's so much pressure on this game. This is the one where even the casual Bison fan thinks they know a whole lot more about it, and then there's just a lot of pressure that plays into that. And you remember 2017. Easton Stick is a phenomenal quarterback, and he had a tough run in 2017, and turnovers become such a factor. Every little thing is under the microscope in this one. And then you move on to the ugly, and boy, there have been some bad injuries, some season-ending injuries that have happened in this matchup. You think about Bruce Anderson and Roseboom right there, where he literally twists his ankle off. I mean, just unbelievably ruthless there. When you're going for the jugular like that, that you see from SDSU, not to mention you think about Levon Perry, a guy who maybe would have had a chance in the NFL, and SDSU takes his knee out. Just some really bad things that have also happened because there's so much in this playoff, in this game.
Beth, watching those clips back just gets my blood boiling, to be honest. And that's where I kind of not to get too harsh, but that's where I lost all respect for this program. It's one thing to have a friendly rivalry, a heated rivalry. You talk trash on the field. The fans don't like each other. You go back and forth. That's all good and that's fun. When you're trying to injure people, and we didn't even show video of it, they were diving. Levon was the one who got the worst of it, but they were diving at knees that whole game.
And that's really where this rivalry really got.
It wasn't one player. It wasn't one time like, oh, he just was angry. It happened a lot, and I just don't like this team because of that. I mean, there's a right way and a wrong way to play this game, and to me, SDSU plays it a lot of times the wrong way.
Well, I want to get the rest of our crew's take on this, so we'll toss it over to Ryan Gallner, Brian Shawn, and Lee Timmerman for your take, maybe on the good, bad, and the ugly of this rivalry.
Well, I think you guys nailed it. It has had some good in this series. There has been some bad, and we certainly know the ugly. Brian, maybe when you look back in the recent history, you have a favorite moment or maybe a most memorable moment?
You know, I think when South Dakota State won in the Fargo Dome on Jake Wienicke's last-second touchdown catch, that's where South Dakota State finally proved they could win a game against the Bison. I think the Bison up to that point had won 6 straight games. And then you felt the blood kind of get worse, I think, as the series has gone along and got a little chippier and got a little more physical. And let's be honest, South Dakota State has modeled what they've tried to do after what North Dakota State has done. They want to match what NDSU has done, deeper on the defensive line, more physical up front, and they want to be able to run the football. I think that's what's changed here in the last 3 or 4 years.
For you, Lee, the greatest memory, I guess, of this series?
I don't know if this is a great memory, but it's especially if you ask Levon, but I think when you start talking about when this series really got to be button heads is when Levon Perry got the old cheap shot to the knee, and I thought that ratcheted it up, not necessarily in that game, but in the year after and the year after that. I think that's what kind of started a little bit of the bad blood, and at that same time, South Dakota State was getting better and the games were getting better.
And I think real quickly, guys, as we look at this game, something we talked about just before we came on air, biggest regular season game for both schools, quite possibly?
I think you could argue it definitely is, based on where both teams are right now and the advantage each team will have if they win this game going into the second half of conference play. North Dakota State's schedule, I have to say, is probably a little bit easier in the second half compared to SDSU, but still a pretty good challenge at Youngstown next week as well. The Bison, this is a huge road to win if they can get it, and for the Jacks to get the marker back and go unbeaten in conference play going into November would be huge.
And Lee, it's all about that seed. If you can get the 1 or the 2, which this game puts the winner in the driver's seat.
Yeah, you have to do what you need to do after you win today, obviously. But yeah, I think the home team and it seems like the rematch, which is always coming in the postseason, will be at the home of whoever wins today. So I think you're right, Ryan.
You can feel it from the field here, and I can assume you feel it from the other side of the field as well. This place is a little bit amped up. The juices, guys, flowing, don't you think?
All right, thank you very much, guys. Yeah, the crowd is filling in nicely. It's sold out here at Dana J. Dykhouse Stadium since they did the renovation.
First
for the
ever.
First time ever. They had to break out the sold out signs and put them in the ticket window.
If you play us, they will come, as the T-shirts say.
Yes.
Yeah, so we heard the guys talking a little bit about the Dakota marker. Let's take a look at the Dakota marker history. And you know, this trophy's been around for since 2004, and
Thanks
9
to the
and
Blue
6,
Key
thanks to the
Club.
Blue Key Society that
Shout out Blue Key.
Kyle Emanuel was a member of. But NDSU owns 13 and 6 mark since 2004 in this series, and that's including the playoffs, and that's really where it matters, because we've seen SDSU win this game 2 years recently in the last couple of seasons, but then we see NDSU knock them out of the playoffs, or the Jacks lose in the semifinals to James Madison. So this Dakota marker, obviously, it's a huge deal. This trophy has become something that these guys really enjoy to play for.
Yeah, it definitely has, but it kind of has. There was talk when we did play in the playoffs, like, are we playing for the marker again? No, that's only the regular season game.
We're playing for one of those. That's what you're
You
playing
get one of
for.
these, you don't have to win the marker game, but you do have to win in the playoffs. But this is huge. Yeah, I mean, take the trophy aside, just playing against South Dakota State, this is the one you circled more than UND. To me, more than Northern Iowa. Some people would argue that, but to me, this is the biggest one because of just what South Dakota State has done and trying modeling what NDSU does and trying to get that success. I think they have also been the most consistent team to me besides the Bison in the Missouri Valley.
Well, and I think that's what makes this game about more than the marker this year, because you heard the guys talking about it down the field. You know, this is about those conference standings. This is number one. This is the, 8 consecutive Missouri Valley Conference championships for North Dakota State, and you look at those standings right now, NDSU has that edge. They're undefeated, but that Valley record is what it's really going to come down to for that. And when you look at their season schedules from here, the Bison are at Youngstown State, host Western, host South Dakota, and then play at Southern, SDSU, at Missouri State, hosting Illinois State, hosting UNI, and then at USD. And I think having those games at home, Illinois State, UNI at home, I think they've got a little bit of a nice advantage in those games, but they've got some serious games coming up here down the stretch.
Well, and I think the other thing is for NDSU, they kind of got some of the cupcake teams, if you will, in the Valley. The teams that are down this year, they got them early, Northern Iowa the exception there, but SDSU kind of has that on the back end of their Valley schedule this year. But
Gosh,
NDSU,
if you can set the tone here, if you can beat up on South Dakota State today and then send them into the rest of the Valley hanging their heads, protect yourself a little bit in those conference standings, just don't keep it close.
You got to think that if NDSU wins this game, the winning streak, the winning streak I was a part of is probably coming down. It's going to be tied at the end of the regular season if NDSU doesn't lose, and I don't see anyone beating us in the second round. I guess that would be in the Dome. Even more implications there in this big game. And the last team that NDSU lost to was right here in this stadium.
Right here in this stadium is the last time NDSU suffered a loss, and that's obviously weighing on the minds of all the fans that are here, weighing on the minds of us because we keep bringing it up. I actually brought it up to Derek Tuska and said, hey, the last time you guys lost?
No idea.
He was like, oh, thanks for bringing that up. I wasn't thinking about that.
It's hard to remember when it's 2 years ago.
Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Don't lose often.
But we are here with you up until kickoff. We will step aside for now, and we'll see you back here right after the break on the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football pregame show. Welcome back to the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football pregame show here from Brookings, South Dakota, as number 1 North Dakota State and number 3 South Dakota State get set to kick off here in less than an hour. Let's get to know a little bit more about the Jackrabbits and Ryan Gellner, who caught up with their play-by-play guy. Ryan?
Hey guys, upstairs in the Dana House Stadium, the view for Tyler Merriam, who will call today's game for the Jackrabbit Radio Network. And man, this game's got so much on it, Tyler. What are you looking at? What are the keys to this one?
Well, I think it'll be a great football game. Certainly hope so. I mean, we've been talking about this all week, seemingly even longer than that. So I hope it lives up to the hype. I think both teams with redshirt freshman quarterbacks, this will be one of their biggest challenges for both of them. How will Trey Lance handle probably the most hostile environment he's dealt with? And how does Jabore Gibbs handle one of the 2 biggest games he's played in, the other being the opener at Minnesota? That's going to go a long way to deciding this. But 2 really good defenses. I mean, the SDSU defense has picked it up another level, which really is why I think this is such an even matchup on paper. And we know North Dakota State, they don't rebuild, they just reload, and they've certainly done that on defense this year as well.
How big of a factor do you think, first time in stadium history that it's sold out, how big of a factor do you think the Jack crowd can make?
Well, I think it certainly could be a factor. Now, you're outdoors, so the noise level will definitely be different. We know there'll be some NDSU fans here as well, but it certainly could be a factor. It's just a matter of what people make of it. I can tell you with the buzz of College game day and everything, there is a vibe on this campus and this community I've never felt for a football game. So there is something special going on here. Does it play over into the football game in a little while? That's up to the fans, and we'll have to see.
How about that same point from the player standpoint? Do you think that feeds in all the distractions? As you very well know, as Bison fans know, the players only know what they know. How much do they know?
I think it's been more of a distraction for us on an administrative side of things working with ESPN. I think John Stiglmeyer talked with some of the folks who were at NDSU when game day was there, who now are at Wyoming, and their take on it was let the kids enjoy it. Let them have a moment to experience this. Don't try to hide it from them. So they went and toured the set on Friday. They've been exposed to it. But this is a mature group. They might not win this football game today, but I don't think it'll have anything to do with game day. I think it's been an unbelievable thing for campus, and I think they've taken a part of it as they should.
They're all big in this conference, but maybe biggest regular season game in a long time for both squads?
Well, certainly for SDSU. I mean, the Jacks have played some big games against NDSU, but they've either been in September or it's been like 2 years ago here in early November when the Jacks are playing just to be a top 8 seed. The winner of this game has the inside track to probably the number 1 seed, certainly a top 2 seed. So there is a ton on the line. We're late enough in the year where it really has some meaning.
Let's get it done. We're not going to decide this thing. It doesn't matter what we say, what we do. The game's coming up. Have a wonderful call. Appreciate the time.
To you as well. Let's kick it off right now. Let's go.
Back to you guys. Let's go.
All right.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
We're going to wait the 47 minutes that they have on the clock.
I don't know. You ready to lay a couple hits?
I'm ready, yeah. They got an extra helmet for me again. I'm ready to go. I need a couple snaps. I only got a couple snaps.
You'll have to take the ring off, though.
Nah,
you
I
can't
can use
take
it to my advantage.
All right, let's look a little bit at this Jacks team. They obviously are very good. Jabari Gibbs is quarterback, and we'll talk about him a little bit later on in the show. But this Jacks team is real. Their only loss is to undefeated Minnesota.
Yeah, when they had forever to prepare for them.
Yeah, that's fair.
No,
how often do we talk about how long you have to prepare for that first team of the season?
They did, yeah. And I mean, me and Beth don't like to do this, but we do have to give them somewhat credit. Like I said at the top of the show, they have been the most consistent team in the Valley by far, other than NDSU. Everyone else you'll see up and down, especially Youngstown State. They've been kind of all over the place, but they run the ball well. I don't think Jabari Gibbs is a guy you want to drop back 30, 40 times in the game. I think if that happens today, you're going to see NDSU have a really good day. But they do a lot of things. They pull a lot of linemen. There's going to be some trick plays. They have some really good skill. I'm not 100% sold on their offensive line, but I think they're at least solid up there. Their defensive line is really good. They have a couple questions in the secondary, and that's where, again, we'll get into that probably a little bit later, but that's where Trey Lance, I think, if he is called upon, he's going to be a key player in this game.
And there you have it, folks. That's the scouting report.
Yeah, that's good enough for me. Let's get into a fun segment for us.
Wait. We cannot finish talking about South Dakota State without mentioning, one of the
defensive number 2.
Yeah, you have to talk about Roseboom, Christian Roseboom, when you talk about SDSU. We of course mentioned him off the top with his horrible with ankle gate.
He was a freshman that year.
But beyond that, that's the thing. When you look at Christian Roseboom, when you continue to see him on the roster, I was like, when is this guy going to graduate? Because he has been wreaking havoc on the Missouri Valley and NDSU. He's made his number known for NDSU in the seasons past.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I played against him. I think he's been here that long. So no, but he's all over the field. I mean, he's I saw a stat. I think he's like second or something like that, or maybe even first as far as career tackles in FCS. So I mean, he's an outstanding player. I think he's matured a little bit since that year. He did do the ankle gates, but he's a good player and someone NDSU is going to have to keep an eye on, especially when they're running offense.
I think you treat Roseboom like other teams treat Jabril Cox. You got to know where he is at all times. Okay, now we'll get into a fun segment for us. Thank you, Beth. We will get into our pick'em. Last week we each went 3-2, so not the best, but that leaves Kyle at 6-4 overall. Beth, 500, 5-5. That's good. And 7-3 for the leader in the clubhouse at the moment.
Still early in the season.
It's 2 weeks in. All right, let's get into our Valley picks today. Western Illinois and Youngstown State. Kyle?
Well, I already had this locked in, and now as I look at my phone, Youngstown already took a lead, but I have Youngstown State in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. Picked Youngstown State here. I am not giving up on my Youngstown State picks this year.
I do not know that Western's going to win a football game this year, and it's certainly not going to happen this week against Youngstown State. All right, we move on to our next pick. Northern Iowa at Missouri State. We saw the Bears last week.
I think this one's closer than the experts think, to quote some of the game day guys, but I have to go Northern Iowa.
He wanted to flip-flop.
Yeah, I'm picking Northern Iowa on this one.
We saw what Missouri State was last week. We've seen Northern Iowa. I think Northern Iowa is the better all-around football team than Missouri State. Our next game in the Valley, Indiana State at Illinois State.
I'm not picking an upset. Not again. I'm going Illinois State in this game. I think they just run the ball too well.
Yeah, I think Illinois State is a good football team. The Bison just had a really hot day. Illinois State, absolutely.
I am also taking Illinois State. I believe, I couldn't remember. There's no way I would have taken Indiana State. All right, Illinois State for me as well. This one is the interesting one. Southern Illinois at South Dakota.
I've been on the South Dakota bandwagon, and I'm going to stay. I think they win this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going South Dakota on this one, 100%, no doubt.
I am a champion of Southern Illinois. I think if they win this game, they actually have a shot at a playoff spot. So if they win this game, that could be a big implication for them getting into the playoffs.
I respect you're going bold. I respect you're going bold.
I am going bold. Also, I'm trying to keep a lead on you guys, so I got to differ somewhere. All right, and when we also have our bonus game, it is Nevada at Wyoming. your old head coach.
I went with the old ball coach last week in Kleiman, and he got it done for me. I'm going with the old ball coach again. I got Wyoming.
Yeah, I got Wyoming in this one as well. Going Coach Bull.
I think Nevada has one win this year. I don't think it's going to come. They're going to double that up at Wyoming. So I'll take Wyoming as well. And Kyle, we always take your pick on this game. I think we all know who we would take in this one. So obviously you're taking the Bison, but
I am taking the Bison, but unlike Pat McAfee, I did a little bit of research on this game, and I did just fly in and pander to the people and look up the population of the state and think that everyone is going to South Dakota State. Pat McAfee, do you know that there is another Division I college in this state? USD down the road, Vermilion is not a fan of the Jackrabbits. You were wrong. The entire state is not with them. I'm going Bison 27-17.
A close one, 27-17. We'll
And
see.
you kept the sleeves on.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm
I'm
glad
a
you didn't do
professional.
that.
I love Pat, though. I mean,
Hey, he's great.
if you're watching Pat,
He
you're
was
probably
fired
not,
up. It
but
was
if
fun
you
to
are-
see him. All right, we'll step
send it to
aside.
him.
We come back. We got more here on the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football pregame show as we get you set for number 1 versus number 3. Stay with us.
Whoa, they got that clap on camera.
Clap. I felt like that really set the tone here.
Me, for sure. Yes. That's yeah.
Me?
You see it? Look
Hey,
at his.
When I take this out,
Look at
though,
his
hey,
scalp.
hey.
Look at his scalp.
When I take it out, though, what?
Yeah, he lied. He
I'm
got
serious.
he got that nappy head.
No. You should have seen him before he got his haircut.
No.
though. Yeah.
Dimitri.
me.
Yeah, Dimitri. Dimitri don't care about nobody.
You got me messed
Dimitri
up.
don't care about nobody.
I do care. I do care. What?
You listen to Kevin Gates.
Probably Ty. Ty frying everybody though. Like,
They don't know what frying is.
okay, what?
Frying is telling jokes about people. Basically, you talk about somebody. It's not bullying, though. It's not bullying. You just tell jokes about people.
You just can't get in your feelings.
Yes. Me. I'm way faster.
Me.
No.
He probably has faster acceleration, but my top speed's faster than him.
So we lying on camera now.
No.
Okay, we lying on
Who
camera.
has the fastest 40?
We lying on camera.
Go ask Kramer.
Go, we
Go
got
ask
hooked
Kramer.
up to the mall, bro.
Go ask Kramer.
Go, I got the.
Go
yeah.
ask Kramer.
We
Time don't lie.
we don't dance.
Yeah, I don't dance.
We don't dance.
Nope. We just be jigging.
Yeah, we don't dance. Me. I just did it today.
It's because he wearing
On the
slides.
escalator, yeah. I got Nike slides on. What do you do?
I'm a simple guy. I don't know. He be singing all the time. He likes singing to people. So.
No, I'm not singing.
Oh, him for sure. I reply to everybody.
What?
What? You be looking at people and don't even reply at all.
Dimitri. And he can't argue this.
I can't.
He was already late.
I sleep a lot.
He be late to everything.
No, you lying.
Damn, we both got hooped.
Yeah.
So I don't, we both got the hoop.
You do upgrade.
Welcome back to Dana J. Dykehouse Stadium here in Brookings on the campus of South Dakota State University. Let's, I'm sorry, I keep thinking about Ty and Dimitri. That's really funny. That was
Just
very
a couple
fun
of
one.
personalities from this football team.
Yeah, just a few. All right, we'll move on to our Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine Injury Report. Ryan Gellner standing by. Ryan?
Thank you, guys. Field side with Dr. Bruce Pyatt. And Dr. Pyatt, something we have not talked about is game day responsibilities for the sports medicine staff, the folks at Sanford. What are you guys doing during the game, and whose responsibility is what? First of all, how many team doctors do you guys travel or have at home games?
So we have a lot of people that contribute to this. My responsibilities are much less than what the whole team's is. You know, we have, besides myself, I have a primary care physician, Dr. Kurt Nias. At home games, there's 2 orthopedic surgeons, myself and Dr. Noonan are there. And those are the physicians that are there. There are also chiropractors that are involved with it, and then the athletic trainers. And there's usually about 6 athletic trainers that are involved on game day with them that both are at home and travel with the team. And really, it's the trainers that do the amazing amount of work. You know, they've been up since probably about 6 o'clock this morning getting something to eat so that they can then be ready to start the preparation with the athletes. They're starting treatments right away. They're also starting to do some of the taping and protective bracing that needs to be done for these athletes at that time.
Someone goes down on the field. This is the stuff we see. You and a lot of times Bobby will be the first on the scene, so to speak. The assessment starts. How do you decide who takes over primary care at that point?
So Bobby's going to be the first one out there. First of all, he's quicker than I am, so he's going to beat me there.
No doubt.
Time. But that's his responsibility, and he knows and identifies that. What I'm doing and what Dr. Nias is doing is we're trying to identify those things that we think are going to require input of a physician. So if it looks like somebody's got a cramp, I may not need to be out there and assist with that. Bobby can handle most of what's happening with that, or his other athletic trainers. But if it looks like a significant extremity injury, looks like a concussion, athlete's unconscious or has any kind of a spine injury, then we're going to get involved right away. And that's when we jump into it.
Finally, I see during the game when I watch you, you are continually checking on a player. Maybe they banged their hand on somebody, maybe they twisted a knee. You're always going up saying, how you doing, how you doing?
Yeah, I've kind of learned over the years these kids want to play, and if somebody's not there telling them, hey, you shouldn't be out there and this is dangerous, they're going to keep pushing it off until it's too late. And so we're trying to keep on them, and it may be nothing more than they've strained something. We want them keeping it warm, we want them keeping it loose, and we just keep on them, or we want them hydrating, and we'll just be reminding them constantly. They're focused on what their assignments are, not necessarily on what their extremity's doing. At other times, though, I'm looking to see if they're trying to hide an injury from us, and if that's the case, then we're going to evaluate it to be sure it's safe.
Very interesting stuff. You probably don't hear it enough, but thanks for what you do, because it's such a big part of the game. The all-time winningest FCS doctor in FCS history. It's amazing. Guys, back to you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Ryan. They say it takes a village. It really does with this orthopedics and sports medicine staff. Here's a look at the injury report. Garrett Malmstrom is going to warm up. We're not sure if he's going to be able to go. And Zach Mathis, who got hurt last week, is not going to give it a go today. But I think there's some encouraging news that we've heard about the Mathis injury. They're still waiting on a few more tests, but it seems like it's going to be a little bit less than what we initially thought. All right, let's get into the quarterbacks that we're going to see today. A redshirt freshman and a redshirt freshman going.
I love this matchup. I've been looking forward to this one since like June.
Yeah.
When I was expecting Trey Lance to be the NDSU quarterback. I know they played the game and they waited and they gave everybody the opportunity, but I was really looking forward to Trey Lance and Jabari Gibbs in this game.
Yeah, it seems like the two institutions lost two really good quarterbacks, and they're going to replace them with two really good quarterbacks.
Just another way these programs kind of continue to take all these steps together.
Yeah, let's take a look at some of the stats here for these guys, and it's kind of an interesting thing for Trey Lance. He's been effective this year, and he didn't have his best game last week, but he was still 21 of 31.
And he still remained calm, and he still led this team, and they still got a 22-0 win. And he finished what they needed to do to make this game happen. And I think what I'm most excited about with Trey Lance in this game is, first of all, he's been routinely consistent, but beyond that, this is a really big game for him this week. He told us this week in talking to him that he's an hour from home. He's from Marshall, Minnesota. This is a closer game for him than Target Field was. And everyone was trying to make a big deal about that one. This one, all of his classmates go here. He's got a best friend on the other side of the field that's going to be coming for him. He's pumped up for this game, and you already saw it. He was giving it to the SDSU fans a little bit.
All right, let's take a look at Jabari Gibbs' numbers on the season. He hasn't played in every game this year. He sat out with an injury for a couple of these, so some of these numbers are a little bit low. But the thing that stands out is he's not running the football as much as Taryn Christian used to, and that I think is by design because he has been a little banged up this season.
A little banged up, and why show what you don't have to if you don't need to? And I think that's always a huge part of this game that we talk about, is that SDSU and NDSU always pull something out of their toolbox a little bit late when they see each other. The big thing I think about Jabari Gibbs that I really want to make sure we talk about here, I just haven't been overly impressed with his ability to spread the ball around, in the sense that he looks exactly at who he's going to throw to, and I'm just concerned about that in his development. Trey Lance is winning that battle in terms of just the football IQ there and the quarterback presence in that area, and that's why I think Trey Lance has the edge here.
Yeah, and these two offenses, they're going to try and trick you into what they do. Let's learn a little bit more about tricking the defense, and we join Ryan Gelner and Kyle Emanuel. Guys.
Hey guys, one thing South Dakota State does is obviously run the ball really well. Once they start running the ball well, they switch gears a little bit, and they will go with a play-action pass, a run-pass option, and we bring in our defensive expert, Kyle Emanuel, to talk through that. First of all, you've got to be able to run the ball to run an effective RPO or run-pass option.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're not running the ball, then as a defense, you don't have to respect it. You don't have to react as quickly to the run when the team's not running the ball. And for South Dakota State, they have to be able to run the ball in this game. I think if you drop Jabari Gibbs back 30, 40 times, they're not going to have a lot of success. So they're going to do a lot of this play action. They're going to do a lot of RPO. And how it affects you as a defensive guy, especially let's start with the defensive line. Every single play, you have to figure out what you're doing here. So whether it's a run or a pass, we got the team coming up behind us as well. We'll try and stay out of their way.
Don't be afraid of these guys.
I'm not. But so you have to know what's happening as a run pass. So as a defensive lineman, when you think it's a run, you have to set the edge, right? If you just fly upfield, now you create big holes. Now it's easier to run the ball. As a linebacker, it's the same thing. You have to get into your zone drop. Now, if you don't know if it's a run or a pass, that makes it difficult, especially when the team's running the ball well. If you're Jackson Hankey back there and South Dakota State's running the ball well, you might bite up. That's when RPOs can get hit in behind you in a zone coverage.
So if I'm the quarterback and I'm reading you, right, I'm watching to see where you're going, what is the most important key for you as far as reading where the ball's going? If I'm keeping and throwing or if I'm handing off?
Well, there's a lot of keys you can look at, Ryan, and a lot of times offensive linemen will give it away in their stance, or they'll give it away in what they do after the snap. So there's a lot of keys, and as a football player, you just have to kind of react and be good, run and pass.
Much more on the pregame show. When we come back, we will do a lot more as we get ready for North Dakota State and South Dakota State next. Brian Sean, Lee Timmerman joining me fieldside as we get ready for North Dakota State and South Dakota State. Lots going on this week, and that starts our Dakota Magic keys to the football game. And Brian, it really is talking about some of that outside noise, and there is plenty. When you have the number 1 team versus the number 3 team, when you're playing this late, when rankings come into it, and then college game day comes into it, how does North Dakota State avoid the noise, worry about the game?
You know, the Bison over the years have done a good job of just keeping everything like this. Every week, preparation is the same. Every week, everything is the same. And that, I think, has been a big key, is not trying to change too much throughout the course of the week and not try to make one game bigger than the other. Yes, it's a big game, but you know what? Last week was a big game. Next week's going to be a big game. So I think Matt Entz and the coaching staff have just done a really good job of trying to keep their team focused on that. For South Dakota State, I think that might be a little bit trickier. I know Stig thinks he has a mature team, but you can't tell me everything going on around here doesn't have some impact to some of the guys on this team.
Should be interesting. We'll see how much that plays into today's football game. Let's go to our second key to the football game, and that's dealing with what happened last week on first down. North Dakota State was not good on first down a week ago, and so we say better on first. You can see on your screen last week they were 2nd and 9, 13 times. Beyond that, 6 times, Lee, they went 3 and out, and they were stuffed 14 times on first down a week ago. It has to be better today.
It certainly does, and I think the one thing that South Dakota State will see if they pick up on it, but I thought it was real interesting last week. Missouri State blitzed on early downs to stop the run. Most of the time you just think of a pressure as to get the quarterback on 3rd and long, but they really did blitz to stop the run. 35 times Missouri State did that. It worked well last week. We'll see if the Jacks pick up on that this week, but there's no way that those numbers are happening again today, I don't think. I don't see it happening.
Our third key to the football game, the Dakota Magic Casino keys to the game, is the strong boom. And what we mean by that is 2 very good players, maybe the best offensive player, Pierre Strong, and the best defensive player, Christian Rosenboom. Let's start with Pierre Strong. Pretty good running back.
Pierre Strong, to me, is a great balance of size and speed. I think he's the most talented back NDSU has seen, close to James Robinson in terms of the way he can just accelerate through a hole so fast, runs tough between the tackles, patient runner, and he glides a lot like Robert Smith. That's what I would compare him to in terms of a running style with the Minnesota Vikings. He just glides along and then goes.
Christian Rosenboom, pretty good on the other side.
Really?
He is the 2nd all-time leading tackler at South Dakota State. He will take over that top spot this year.
He will. He's so athletic. The one thing I just, in talking about Rosenboom this week, I found really interesting is you would think that with a kid that athletic that colleges were going to be all over him. From what I understand, do you know what his only other offer was? Northwestern of Iowa. So it was South Dakota State or NAI and not much in between. I thought the rest of the Iowa schools would be all over him, but the Jacks got, I guess, a kid with that much athleticism. I mean, he averaged about what Strong was carrying the ball in high school. So, I mean, he's all over the place and very, very impressive. And he will be the all-time leading tackler before it's all done here at South Dakota State.
And he single-handedly maybe has had the biggest effect on this series since North Dakota State and South Dakota State started playing. When we come back, we visit with the Bison head coach, Matt Entz. He tells us about this big game. We'll do that and more when we come back.
This is the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football Pregame Show.
North Dakota State and South Dakota State have played each other 16 times in this rivalry. And as the Bison get set to take on the Jacks today, the Bison have taken home that traveling trophy 9 of the last 15 times, although they stumbled here in Brookings the last time. That leads off this week's Herdline News. The Dakota marker is a 75-pound model replica of the original marker that sat along the North Dakota-South Dakota State border. The Bison and the Jacks have played each other 19 times since the move to Division I, with NDSU winning 4 playoff games, but those games are not Dakota marker games. The Jacks have won 4 of the last 7 right here in Brookings. As you know by now, South Dakota State hosted College Game Day this morning. It's the 3rd time NDSU has been featured on the biggest college football show in the nation. Game Day was in Fargo in 2013 and again in 2014. The Bison are the only non-FBS school to appear on the show 3 different times. You can bet that NDSU players watched the show this morning, and you can bet there are concerns about that type of exposure and how it's going to play out in this football game as far as the players are concerned. I began my very own game day interview with Matt Entz not too long ago, and I asked him about all of this outside noise. Well, Coach, I think the obvious question, assess your team this week with all that outside noise.
We've tried to avoid it all, and that was for somebody else to be concerned about. I really didn't talk much about it until maybe a little bit on Thursday at the end of practice, but through the course of the week, we tried to minimize and avoid the noise as much as we can. Our number one priority is taking care of what happens between the yard lines today, and it had nothing to do with ESPN or the crowd or anything like that. We can just control us.
When you look at South Dakota State, what jumps off the tape at you? What's your number one concern?
Well, offensively, they got a number of different playmakers. They got wide receivers that can stretch you vertically. They got great running backs, and they have a stable of them. They have a quarterback that can buy time with his feet, can extend plays, but also be involved in the run game as well. So they're going to attack you. They're going to make you defend the entire field from a defensive standpoint. And then on their defensive side, they got some veteran players. They got a linebacker that I think is a really good football player. They play 8-9 different guys up front on the defensive line. So they're a solid front. They're sound in what they do. They tackle well. And so you're going to have to earn it. There's not going to be a whole bunch of free yards out there. So we've emphasized making sure that we're just physical up front and we finish our plays, and hopefully we can get some yards after contact.
To your credit, your offense has been unpredictable this year, and I think that's a good thing. What do you see today? What do you think you'll be able to do?
Well, I think, there's a lot of similarities between what SDSU does and what the Bison do defensively. So I think from a comfort level, our kids are going to understand the pictures they're going to see during the day. We still have to execute, still got to finish blocks and take care of our assignments. But I think there's some yards out there. I think there's some run game that we can take advantage of. And we want to still continue to be somewhat unpredictable and force people to have to defend the whole field. And that's maybe a little bit a makeup of my background being a defensive guy. I know the things that have caused me problems or create sleepless nights for me, and I want to make someone else have some sleepless nights.
Obviously, your team knows the magnitude of this game, not just rivalry, standing, all that stuff. What's your final message as they leave the locker room today?
Do what we do. We've prepared for this, going back to spring, going through fall camp. It's the most important game right now because it's the only one we have this week. Finish every play, and then those plays will keep stacking up, and we'll have good play after good play, and we'll take care of business at the end.
Can't wait. Let's do it.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
About 16 minutes from kickoff here between the Jacks and the Bison. The band about ready to take the field. When we come back, our crew will take the field. We'll go upstairs, get ready for this football game. Jacks Bison 1 versus 3 coming up next.
Welcome back, field level for the Farmers Union Insurance Bison football pregame show. We are about 12 minutes away from kickoff for number 1 North Dakota State and number 3 South Dakota State. We got some fans in the stands that are calling out for Kyle Emanuel.
Some former teammates that are trying to distract me. I will not let it happen.
So many former teammates in attendance for this game. I think that tells you exactly how big this one is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's like a little mini Frisco reunion here this weekend.
But it's south of Fargo. That's true. All right, let's get into our Bobcat heavy lifting report. And Kyle, you've picked Trey Lance.
I've picked Trey Lance. It's someone I could probably pick every single game. But honestly, to me, until this game, I really haven't felt like he needed to be the guy necessarily. Like, you need him to play well, but you didn't need him to be the guy. I think you might have to call on him today a little bit more than usual.
I'm looking forward to a huge game from Trey Lance just to see him shine on this big stage. I think you saw it against Butler. At Target Field. He just really rose to the occasion. I mean, there could have been so many reasons things could have gone astray in that one, and instead he just shined so bright, and I think we're going to see a lot of that same stuff here today. Yeah,
well, I think when you look at South Dakota State, and we've been talking about it throughout the show, but they're going to try to sell it on the run just like Missouri State did last week, and I think eventually he might be called upon to throw the ball a little bit more than we were accustomed to seeing, but that's why I picked NDSU. Well, that's not the only reason why I picked NDSU, but it's one of the reasons why I picked NDSU is because I think Trey Lance is a better thrower than Jabari Gibbs. I just do. I think he looks more natural doing it, and I think he might be a better runner as well, at least with the juke moves, with making people miss out in the open field.
I tell you, that's the interesting thing about this is it's 2 redshirt freshman quarterbacks, and it's our first look at them head-to-head. I know they don't play against each other, on the same side of the field, but I think it's interesting, and we can see kind of a litmus test for where these 2 quarterbacks are early on in their careers.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing what the guys in the booth have to say. Let's toss it upstairs now to Brian Shawn and Lee Timmerman.
All right, thanks so much, guys. Brian Shawn, Lee Timmerman with you. And LT, they talked about the quarterbacks. Trey Lance, what he's done has been remarkable. But this Jabari Gibbs young man has come in and taken over and filled some huge shoes with Taryn Christian, and so far he's done a nice job running their offense as well.
One of the things I like about Gibbs is when you start digging into his high school background, Phillips High School out of Chicago, he's a winner. He won 2 state championships in the state of Illinois. Obviously, that is not a very easy thing to do, so I think when you have that baseline, you have something to build on. But in terms of what Kyle was talking about, but if you want to say where are they at right now as 2 redshirt freshmen, well, Trey Lance is light years better than Gibbs, but Gibbs doesn't have quite as much responsibility in the offense in terms of calls as Lance does at this point, I don't think either.
And you talked about Trey Lance's development, how far he's come along. He's being asked to do more at the line of scrimmage. When the call comes in on Gibbs, he has to run the play. Lance, he can call things out at the line and make changes if he wants.
And he will today. He'll look a lot at where the boundary safety is in relation to the rest of the Jackrabbits defense and make calls based on that. So he'll be trying to spot number 6 to make calls today.
Looking forward to it. It's coming up here in just a couple of moments. North Dakota State, number 1 in the land, undefeated against 6-1 South Dakota State, number 3 in the nation. From Brookings, 6:40 left on the Coors Light countdown clock.
Welcome back to the Farmers Union Insurance Bison football pregame show. Number 1 North Dakota State, number 3 South Dakota State. They just did the anthem, and
a beautiful flyover.
A flyover for this one. You think this is a huge deal? That was a flyover that we got to see.
I'm ready to go play some football.
Pumped. I am so pumped right now.
We had to get rid of the chairs because I just couldn't sit any longer as we get ready for this one. The team's about ready to take the field here in Brookings, South Dakota. Just absolutely so pumped for this football game. What do you think you're most excited about?
I just want to see the 2 teams play. At this point, we've been talking about it. We had game day here this weekend. We got to see some of that atmosphere. It is a packed house here at this stadium. 19,000 people are here to watch this.
Well, and I just feel like we've been building for this game
all season.
I mean, I've been talking about this one since June when it comes to planning this pregame show and everything that goes into it, just because this is always such a big game, and I just knew that these 2 were going to match up. This is the Missouri Valley Conference championship game right now.
All right, let's get the final thoughts as we have our Coors Light countdown clock on. Let's get the final thoughts of our crew.
Going into this game is to see how Cade Johnson lines up and where he lines up. If it's in the slot, watch for number 42, Jabril Cox, to be right on him. That should be a fun matchup to watch between 2 of the most dynamic players at their positions in the FCS.
Well, my final thoughts on how these teams, they scout each other to ad nauseum sometimes, I think. But there's always something new. Look for something new from the Bison in a obvious passing situation for South Dakota State. The Bison have earmarked the center. The Clark being the weakest link. So who's NDSU's best pass rusher? Well, that's Derek Tuska. So look for Tuska, the defensive end, to move inside against the center on 3rd and long. And then if he actually gets occupied or gets a little bit of help, look for Hankey to come behind him to put pressure on the quarterback.
Guys, my final thoughts. Pierre Strong's a really good running back. If North Dakota State can stop Pierre Strong today, they're the better defense in this football game. If North Dakota State is the better defense, North Dakota State not only wins the game, but they win the rock. Kyle, you wanted to show us, as you're coming from the bench, what this is like and what your final thought is.
Yeah, Ryan, I think this is what you're going to be seeing at the end of this game, is NDSU coming from this angle, from this bench, coming to pick up this rock. And South Dakota State messed this up a couple of years ago. The base is not connected to the rock, South Dakota State, so you got to figure that out. I'm going to show them how it's done. Here we go. Let's go. This is how it's done right here. You put the proper states forward. The SD is going to stay behind today. This thing's pretty heavy, though. Back to you guys.
You got to lift it up high. You got to lift it up proud. And that's how it's done, guys. Back to you.
He was so nervous about doing that.
I loved it. You crushed it, Kyle. You absolutely crushed it there. I think we've talked about it. We've talked about it a lot, but I think ultimately my final thought in this game is how these redshirt freshmen show up today. And I just think Trey Lance is amped for this game. He was pumped up. He was getting the fans rowdy.
Yeah.
And as they ran out here, you saw the game face on his face. They just ran by us, and he looks as focused as ever. And, man, that kid is as cool as a cucumber.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the big difference today is the play of these two quarterbacks as we have 30 seconds now on our Coors Light countdown clock. This is the premier matchup of the FCS this weekend. We've got people from James Madison that are curious about this game. They're watching this game more than they're probably watching their own.
Thursday.
Yes. So this is the premier matchup of the FCS. The winner of this one is in control of the Missouri Valley Football Conference Championship. Let's just tee it up and play, shall we?
Yeah, absolutely. All eyes are on Brookings. Let's send it up to the booth now. We will see you back at halftime.